And tensions in the Middle East are escalating, as we just said. U.S. and Israeli forces continue operations in Iran. For analysis on the latest developments, we welcome Rebecca Grant. She's vice president of the Lexington Institute, as well as a national security analyst. Thanks for joining us this morning, Rebecca. Welcome. President Trump suggested the U.S.-Israeli campaign in Iran could last 4 to 5 weeks. From a strategic perspective, how realistic is that timeline, and what are the implications if it extends beyond that?
It all depends on the two major target sets, and that would be the Iranian ballistic missile complexes, and that's a target set that's spread all across the country. And then, of course, the remaining leadership targets. Although there's been great success here, and of course, the historic death of Ayatollah Khamenei, Central Command has released information that they are working hard to target other IRGC leadership, their aerospace forces, and going after some of those targets and gotaways could be another rate determining step. Meanwhile, while the offensive campaign is going on and it's going very well, as we see, the U.S. and allies are also playing zone defense against Iran's drones and ballistic missiles, and we've got to keep that up.
Yeah, as you say, there's like a very momentary pat on the back for getting Khamenei, and it is quite significant. But the barrage that's going to Israel and to all of the Gulf countries, it is quite concerning. Trump also mentioned the possibility of a Venezuela-style leadership transition in Iran, as opposed to potentially what people are looking for, which is the crown prince to assume this 180-day plan. What would it look like if it's more like a Venezuela-style transition?
Well, in that case, it might be, and this is just speculation, but an individual like President Pezeshkian, who may be of a more reasonable frame of mind. I think what President Trump says there is that he's always willing to talk, once the Iranians stop shooting, and that there may be officials in Iran that the U.S. and allies could work with. And I think that really tells us this is not a boots on the ground. There is not going to be a ground invasion. And the major metric for the United States for increasing our security and safety is to carry out the complete destruction of Iran's military capabilities. That's really what Operation Epic Fury is going to be judged on. That's the metric that we need to watch. Then Iran's going to have a chance, and it will be up to their people to decide what the new day for Iran looks like.
Yeah, and how has the widening involvement of regional and Western actors such as Hezbollah, engagement from Lebanon, as well as European defense responses, how has that changed the nature of the conflict?
Well, Hezbollah violated their ceasefire, and Israel will take out their missile launchers as a result. What's impressive now, of course, is the new involvement of Great Britain. They have allowed their bases at Diego Garcia and at Akrotiri in Cyprus to be used for staging of the operations against Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. Also very important, the United Kingdom has fighter jets based out of Qatar that are helping with the air defense. They've already shot down one Iranian drone. And to paint this picture for you, we don't have a lot of details, but there are fighter jets from the Eastern Mediterranean right through to the North Arabian Gulf, providing 24/7 patrols over our key bases, over Gulf states, including, I'm pretty sure, their own air forces, and of course out over our Navy ships as part of the CAP, or Combat Air Patrol. They are there to intercept drones, to track missiles, and of course our Navy destroyers to shoot down those missiles too. We hear that France may be joining in this as well. And, the decision by Iran to shoot wildly at U.S. forces and at Gulf state civilian targets has really changed the game and brought in other regional players to put pressure on that despised nation and regime.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the military component, which you're describing, which was maybe they took the bait and they should have focused their efforts and not brought those other countries into the fold, and now they're really sort of isolated. But there's the economic concerns, which, of course, that could turn the tide politically. I saw at the pump no change in gas prices, still well under $3 in Connecticut, where I am. But including the impacts of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and the oil markets, how do you assess the geopolitical fallout beyond this initial wave of military engagement?
Right. Well, I looked at the price at the pump last night too, and again, no change, but I might go fill up my pickup truck. The question is, we've seen oil at 80 to 90 to $100 a barrel before. This would be temporary. Oil prices have been pretty good. Iran, I don't think has the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz ever, and certainly not at this point. They've had 9 Navy ships destroyed. We've heard about some GPS interference, but that's happened before in that region. Right now, there's caution by the international shippers, of course, but everyone wants to see that strait open and continuing to flow. So if the air campaign progresses as it should, then there may be some temporary spike, but I don't think at this point a major disruption in the energy markets. Again, that could change if Iran had targeted some of the oil infrastructure. They did send some shots off towards Saudi Arabia, but I think Iran's ability to launch is going to diminish a lot over the next couple of days, and that will quell the energy markets as well.
And in terms of the overwhelming success of the initial strike by the Israelis, being able to take out so many of the senior leadership, including Khamenei himself, what does succession look like, and what are the what terms of escalation should we be aware of as we go into day 3 and then into days 6, 7, and 8?
Yes, it's going to be very interesting to watch. And just to reiterate, the key is really to get after those Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets, both the military capability and the leadership. We'll just have to see who pops up on Iran's side, but it is going to be a completely changed situation. And I think, at this point, the campaign is a great tactical success, and Iran will never have the military power and the prospect of developing long-range intercontinental missiles and nuclear weapons. That's just going to be taken off the table, the Middle East. And then eventually Iran will be in a much better situation because of Operation Epic Fury.
Now, President Trump has repeatedly said that there would be amnesty for those within the ranks of the regime who lay down their arms. It seems like there's quite a transition that will need to take place so that the police on the ground do not attempt violence at the people as they attempt to rise up and try to form some sort of transition. What might be that tipping point? And is it linear in respect, like where, you saw the Berlin Wall fall and then all of a sudden it's a new day? Or what might it look like?
I think the Berlin Wall is probably a good comparison because it seems impossible and overwhelming, and then suddenly there it is because the people want that to happen. This is a regime that killed over 32,000 of their own people. The economy has been terrible. The Iranian people are better than that regime. And so I think they have already thought a lot about what they want their country to look like. We may not see the final form of it for a while, but again, America's task is to take away Iran's military capability and give that country a chance. It's up to the people of Iran to shape their political and economic future.
Now, it seems as if Israel had assets on the ground or some type of, their version of the CIA to be able to figure out that there was an opportunity. Might a transition have some sort of protection for whomever might rise as leader, whether it's the Crown Prince or it's somebody that's currently part of the regime who wants to reform? What might our own involvement in providing security on the ground look like? I'm careful not to say, boots on the ground, not militarily, but some forms of protection to aid from any type of sort of rogue actors that might, try to assassinate a would-be leader.
Well, if a good and fair leadership and government for Iran comes through, it could look a bit like the transition we're seeing in Syria, where the leader is, a former terrorist who has reformed and is being given every chance to try to pull Syria together. And the Arab League has helped enormously. We've done sanctions relief. And sanctions relief would be a huge lever that we have available if Iran does surface with a government that is reasonable and, frankly, that is willing to talk about willing to get rid of their nuclear enriched fuels and do what has been asked of them. Then it could go well pretty quickly for Iran economically if sanctions come off for a good and decent government there.
And Rebecca, just as we finish up, we're almost always speaking with you about Russia. What does it look like from the Russian and Chinese side? Obviously, they've condemned the action, but what are you looking for?
And Iran, way more than Venezuela, is their tight ally. Iran makes those drones that Russia uses in Ukraine. China bought all of Iran's oil. To see their ally taken apart like this has to really set back Russia. And I'm sure Xi Jinping in China has to realize everything being done to Iran, we can accomplish across the Pacific if he chooses to create trouble there.
Well, such a historic moment we're having. Rebecca Grant, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.